The Galactic Engineering Council had existed for 12,000 years, and in all that time, its members had never laughed at a presentation until today. Vexnar, the lead representative from the Thalian species, watched the holographic display with all four of his eyes widening in disbelief. The human engineer standing at the front of the chamber seemed completely unaware that his proposal was causing such a reaction among the assembled aliens. And so, the human continued, pointing at a rotating schematic that looked like something a child might draw. By using controlled explosions at the rear of the vessel, we can achieve speeds previously thought impossible for cargo transport. The chamber erupted again. Delegates from 17 different species made sounds of amusement in their own ways. The Kelrics whistled through their breathing tubes. The Morven clicked their mandibles rapidly. Even the normally stoic Zenthari allowed their facial plates to shift in what could only be described as mockery. Vexnar raised one of his four hands to silence the room. As the senior council member, it was his duty to maintain order, even when faced with such obvious nonsense. "Engineer Marcus Webb," Vexnar said, his translator device converting his words into the human language, "are you suggesting that your species proposes to move spacecraft by, exploding things behind them?" Marcus Webb nodded with enthusiasm. "Yes, that's exactly right. We call it pulse propulsion. Instead of the smooth, continuous thrust that your ion drives provide, we use rapid bursts of controlled detonations. It's actually quite efficient." Efficient? This came from Zithara, the Morven delegate. Her mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was their version of laughter. "Human, our species has been traveling between stars for 8,000 years. The Thalians have done so for 12,000. In all that time, no species has been foolish enough to suggest propelling spacecraft with explosions." Marcus smiled. It was the kind of smile that Vexnar found unsettling, though he could not say why. "With respect, Representative Zithara," Marcus said, "that might be exactly why you haven't improved your transit times in the last 3,000 years." The chamber fell silent. The amusement vanished from the air like heat escaping into space. Vexnar leaned forward in his hovering chair. "You speak boldly for a species that has only been traveling in space for 200 years. 187 years, actually," Marcus corrected. "But who's counting? The point is, we've looked at your technology. We've studied your engines, your hull designs, your navigation systems, and we've found that you've all been doing things the same way for millennia. You found something that worked and you stopped looking for something better." "Because what we have is optimal," Zithara said, her mandibles now clicking with irritation rather than amusement. "Our engineers proved this mathematically ages ago." Marcus walked to the center of the chamber and pulled up a new hologram. This one showed a simple diagram, a small circle with lines extending from it in all directions. "This is how you design spacecraft," he said. "Perfect symmetry, perfect balance, every system placed in exactly the right position according to your calculations, everything smooth and elegant." He changed the display. The new image showed something that looked like a child's drawing of a box with tubes sticking out at odd angles. "This is how we design spacecraft." The Zenthari delegate, whose name was so complex that Marcus had given up trying to pronounce it, spoke for the first time. "That is the ugliest thing I have ever seen." "Thank you," Marcus said, and he meant it. "It's ugly because we don't care about looks. We care about results. Your ships are beautiful pieces of art that do exactly what they were designed to do 3,000 years ago. Our ships are ugly boxes that do whatever we need them to do right now." Vexnar studied the human carefully. He had dealt with many young species in his time on the council. Most of them came seeking membership and approval. They wanted to learn from the older civilizations, to copy their methods and adopt their standards. The humans had been different from the start. "You came to this council 18 years ago," Vexnar said. You asked for membership in the Galactic Trade Alliance. We granted it because you met the basic requirements. You had achieved faster-than-light travel, you had colonized at least 3 worlds, and you had not engaged in warfare with other species. That's correct, Marcus said. In those 18 years, you have submitted 47 proposals to this engineering council. Every single one has been rejected. Also correct. And yet you keep coming back. Marcus shrugged. We're stubborn, it's kind of our thing. A murmur passed through the chamber. The various alien delegates exchanged looks and gestures with each other. Vexnar could sense the mood shifting from amusement to something else. Annoyance, perhaps, or maybe concern. This council exists to maintain standards, Vexnar said. Standards that have kept galactic civilization stable for 12,000 years. Every species that joins the Alliance agrees to follow these standards. If we approved every strange idea that came through these doors, chaos would follow. With respect, Marcus said, stability isn't the same as progress. Progress toward what? Toward better. Zithara made a sound of disgust. You humans always talk about better. Better ships, better engines, better everything, but better according to whom, your standards, your measurements. Marcus pulled up another hologram. This one showed 2 spacecraft side by side. One was sleek and beautiful, clearly of alien design. The other was the ugly human box. These 2 ships are the same size, Marcus explained. Same cargo capacity. Your ship can travel from the Kelric's homeworld to the Thalian homeworld in 43 standard days. Our ship can do it in 11. Silence fell over the chamber once more. That is impossible, the Zenthari delegate said. It's not impossible. We did it last month. We sent a cargo vessel with a full load of agricultural equipment. 11 days, 7 hours, and 32 minutes. Vexnar's secondary hands began to twitch, a sign of stress that he could not control. If this is true, why have we not heard of it? Because no one asked, Marcus said. We've been doing our own thing, following your trade routes, paying your fees, minding our own business. But we thought it was time to share. Share what exactly? Marcus changed the hologram again. This time it showed the ugly human ship in detail. Systems were labeled in simple terms. The propulsion unit at the rear was highlighted. We want to share our technology, free of charge. Any species that wants it can have it. The chamber exploded into noise. Every delegate spoke at once, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the chaos. Vexnar raised all 4 of his hands. Silence. The room quieted, though the tension remained. Why would you give away such technology? Vexnar asked. If your claims are true, you could dominate galactic trade. You could become the wealthiest species in known space. Marcus smiled again, that same unsettling expression. Because we don't want to dominate. We want partners. We want allies who can keep up with us. And honestly, we want you all to stop laughing at our ideas and start paying attention to them. Vexnar looked around the chamber. For the first time in his long career, he saw something in the eyes of his fellow council members that he had never expected to see when dealing with humans. He saw fear. The emergency session of the Galactic Engineering Council lasted for 3 standard days. During that time, engineers from every member species examined the human vessel that had been brought to the Council's orbital station. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about spacecraft design. Vexnar stood in the observation gallery, watching through the transparent wall as a team of Morvan technicians crawled over the human ship's hull. Their movements showed confusion and frustration in equal measure. It should not work, said Zithara, who had joined him at the window. Every calculation we perform says it should tear itself apart. And yet it flew here, Vexnar replied. In 11 days. In 11 days. Zithara's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought among her species. I spoke with our lead physicist yesterday. She has been studying the human engine for 2 days without sleep. She told me that the design breaks at least 14 fundamental principles of spacecraft engineering. Breaks them or ignores them? The question hung in the air. Below them, a Kelrix engineer pulled a panel off the ship's hull and made a high-pitched sound of shock. The component inside was held in place with what appeared to be metal bands wrapped around it multiple times. Is that? Zithara could not finish the question. The humans call it duct tape, Vexnar said. Engineer Webb explained it to me. When a component is too complex to mount properly, they wrap it with this adhesive material until it stays in place. That cannot be real. I watched them repair a coolant leak with it during the demonstration flight. Zithara turned away from the window. Her compound eyes reflected the light from the station's interior lamps, making them seem to glow with inner fire. Senior Vexnar, I must speak honestly. I have served on this council for 300 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations master technologies that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors, but I have never seen anything like this. Neither have I. The humans are dangerous. Vexnar considered this statement carefully. Are they dangerous because of their technology or because of how they think? Both, Zithara said. A species that would strap themselves to a controlled explosion and call it transportation is not thinking like the rest of us. They do not see limits where we see limits. They do not stop where we would stop. Is that not what we wanted when we first encountered them? A fresh perspective, new ideas. Zithara made the clicking sound again, but this time it was different, darker. We wanted them to learn from us. We expected them to adopt our ways, improve upon them gradually, join the galactic community as respectful juniors. Instead, they have been quietly revolutionizing space travel while we were busy laughing at them. The observation gallery's door opened, and Marcus Webb entered. He was carrying a data pad and wearing the same simple uniform he had worn during his presentation. No decorations, no rank symbols, no signs of status, just functional clothing that served its purpose. Representatives, he said, nodding to both of them. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Vexnar said. We were discussing your ship. Ah, Marcus walked to the window and looked down at the vessel. She's not pretty, is she? She is not, Zithara agreed. We named her the Get There Fast. Not very creative, I know, but it describes what she does. Vexnar moved to stand beside the human. Up close, he could see the differences between their species more clearly. The human had only 2 eyes, soft skin, no natural armor or weapons. By every measure used to evaluate species in the galaxy, humans should have been weak and vulnerable. Engineer Webb, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why do your people build things this way? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the alien technicians examine his ship. When he spoke, his voice was different than before. Less confident, more thoughtful. When we first developed space travel, we didn't have much. Our planet was running out of resources. Our population was too large. We knew we had to get to other worlds or die trying, so we built what we could with what we had. That explains your early vessels, Vexnar said. But you have access to better materials now, better technology. You could build ships that meet our standards. We could, Marcus agreed. But here's the thing, our standards work better. Zithara stepped forward. You cannot know that. You have only been traveling in space for less than 2 centuries. That's true, but in those 2 centuries, we've gone from barely reaching our own moon to crossing the galaxy faster than species that have been doing this for thousands of years. Marcus turned to face both aliens. Our methods might seem crazy to you. Explosions for propulsion, duct tape for repairs, designs that look like a child drew them. But they work. They work better than anyone expected, including us. That is precisely what concerns me, Zithara said. You do not even understand why your technology works. "Oh, we understand," Marcus said. "We just understand differently. Your engineers start with theory and then build what the theory allows. Our engineers start with a problem and then find any solution that works, even if the theory says it shouldn't." Vexnar felt a strange sensation in his chest, something he had not experienced in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it as curiosity. Genuine, intense curiosity. "Show me," he said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Show me how your engineers think. Walk me through the process of designing that engine." For the first time since he had arrived, Marcus Webb seemed uncertain. "Are you sure it might change how you see things?" "That is what I am hoping for." Marcus nodded slowly. He raised his data pad and projected a new hologram into the air between them. It showed a simple shape, a circle with an arrow pointing forward. "This is the problem," he said. "We need to move something in that direction." "Yes," Zathara said impatiently. "Every propulsion system starts with this problem." "Right, now here's where we diverge. Your engineers would ask, what is the most efficient way to generate continuous thrust? They would calculate the optimal fuel mixture, the ideal exhaust velocity, the perfect nozzle shape. They would spend years perfecting every component." "As they should," Zathara said. Our engineers asked a different question. They asked, what's the fastest way to move something really, really fast? Marcus changed the hologram. Now it showed a crude drawing of a ball with a firework explosion behind it. The answer was obvious. If you want to move something fast, you put an explosion behind it. That's how bullets work. That's how rockets work. That's how everything fast works. "But explosions are uncontrolled," Vexnar said. "The energy release is chaotic. You cannot direct it efficiently." "You can't direct it efficiently," Marcus corrected. "We found a way. It took us about 2 years of trial and error, but we figured it out." 2 years, Zathara sounded horrified. "Our propulsion systems took 3 centuries to develop." "Sure, but you were trying to be perfect. We were just trying to not die." The hologram changed again, showing a sequence of small explosions, each one carefully timed and positioned. "We discovered that if you sequence the explosions just right, you can create a wave effect. Each explosion builds on the energy of the one before it. Instead of one big chaotic blast, you get a series of controlled pulses that push the ship forward with increasing force." Vexnar studied the diagram, but the stress on the hull would tear apart any ship built to your standards, Marcus finished. "That's why our ships look so different. We don't build for elegance. We build for durability. Every component is mounted with multiple redundant fasteners. The hull is deliberately flexible in some places and rigid in others. It absorbs the shock instead of fighting against it." "The duct tape," Vexnar said, understanding dawning. "The duct tape. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most sophisticated one. Sometimes you just need to hold things together long enough to get where you're going." Zathara made a sound that her translator did not convert. It might have been frustration, or it might have been something closer to admiration. "And you want to share this technology," she said. "All of it." "All of it," Marcus confirmed. "Because the galaxy is big and there's a lot to explore and we don't want to do it alone." Vexnar looked at Zathara. She looked back at him. In that moment, something passed between them that did not need translation. The universe had just changed, and they were only beginning to understand how much. The first test vessel, built to human specifications by a non-human species, launched from the Kelrick shipyard 6 months later. It was piloted by a crew of 3 Kelrick's engineers who had spent those months learning from their human teachers. They had also spent those months arguing with their human teachers, questioning every design choice, and occasionally screaming in frustration at the apparent madness of it all. Vexnar had traveled to the Kelrick system to witness the launch. He stood in the observation tower alongside Marcus Webb and a dozen other officials from various species. The mood in the room was tense. Everyone remembered what had happened to the Morven test ship 2 months earlier. "You are certain the modifications will hold?" Vexnar asked Marcus quietly. "Reasonably certain," Marcus said. "The Kelrics made some improvements to our original design. They actually figured out a better way to sequence the pulse timing. We're going to adopt their method for our own ships." The Morven said the same thing before their test. Marcus winced. Yeah, but in their defense, they were trying to make the design more elegant. They replaced our crude mounting system with their precision brackets. Those brackets were not designed to handle the vibration patterns. 4 crew members were injured. "I know, and I'm sorry, but that's how progress works sometimes. You try something, it fails, you learn, and you try again." The observation tower shook slightly as the launch sequence began. Through the transparent walls, Vexnar could see the Kelric's vessel lifting off from the platform. It was an ugly thing, built to human standards, with visible reinforcement bands around its hull and a propulsion unit that looked like it had been assembled by someone in a hurry. "Here we go," Marcus said under his breath. The vessel reached safe distance from the platform. Then the pulse engine activated. The first explosion was small, barely visible. Then another. Then another. The sequence built in speed and intensity until the explosions blurred together into a continuous stream of light pushing the vessel forward. "Structural readings are stable," announced a Kelric's technician at one of the monitoring stations. "Hull integrity holding at 97%. Velocity increasing," another technician reported. "Passing standard cruising speed now, continuing to accelerate." Vexnar watched in silence as the vessel shrank in the distance. The numbers on the display screens climbed higher and higher. Within minutes, the Kelric ship was moving faster than any vessel built by their species had ever moved. "They did it," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "They actually did it." The celebration lasted for days. Engineers from 20 species gathered to study the successful test data. Arguments broke out over interpretations, over methodology, over the fundamental principles that had made such performance possible. These arguments were different from the ones that had occurred before the human arrival. They were productive arguments, the kind that led to new ideas and new experiments. Vexnar found himself spending more and more time with Marcus Webb during this period. The human had an unusual way of explaining complex concepts in simple terms. He also had an unusual way of asking questions that made Vexnar think about things he had taken for granted for centuries. "Why do you suppose all the galactic species developed similar technology?" Marcus asked one evening. They were sitting in a quiet corner of the station's recreation area, sharing a meal that both species could consume. "Because the laws of physics are the same everywhere," Vexnar replied. "The same principles that govern propulsion in one system govern it in all systems." "Sure, but there are many ways to apply those principles. Why did everyone settle on the same approach?" Vexnar considered the question. It was not something he had ever thought to ask. "I suppose because it was the most logical approach. The mathematics pointed in that direction." "The mathematics pointed toward efficiency," Marcus said. "Specifically, toward fuel efficiency. Every galactic species optimized their designs to minimize fuel consumption and maximize distance traveled per unit of fuel. That is sensible, is it not? Fuel is expensive. Resources are limited. It's sensible if fuel is your primary concern, but what if it's not? What if time is more valuable than fuel?" Vexnar's secondary hands twitched. "Time has always been abundant. Our species live for thousands of years. A journey of 40 days or a journey of 11 days makes little difference in the span of a lifetime." Marcus nodded slowly. "Humans don't live very long. Maybe 80, 90 years if we're lucky. Every day matters to us. We can't afford to spend 40 days on a journey when 11 days is possible." "So your technology is driven by your biology?" Everything is driven by biology. You live for thousands of years, so you optimize for efficiency and stability. We live for decades, so we optimize for speed and results. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different. Vexnar absorbed this information. It explained many things about human behavior that had puzzled him. Their impatience, their willingness to take risks, their seemingly reckless approach to problem solving. What happens, Vexnar asked slowly, when your approach meets our approach, when species with different priorities work together? Marcus smiled. That's what we're trying to find out. The Kelrics took our engine and improved the timing sequence. We never would have thought of that approach because we don't think the way they think. But they would never have built a pulse engine in the first place because it contradicted their basic assumptions about propulsion. You believe the combination will be stronger than either approach alone. I believe it has to be. The galaxy is bigger than any of us understand. There are challenges out there that no single species can face alone. We need each other. Over the following years, the combination proved stronger indeed. Each species that adopted human technology found ways to improve upon it. The Morven developed better hull materials that could withstand even greater stress. The Zenthari created navigation systems that could plot courses optimized for pulse propulsion. The Thalians designed safety systems that reduced the risk of catastrophic failure. And the humans kept pushing. Every time the galactic community thought they had reached the limits of what was possible, human engineers would propose something new, something impossible. Something that made the other species laugh or shake their heads in disbelief. Until it worked. Vexnar watched as the Human Engineering Academy opened its doors on a station at the center of galactic trade routes. Students from every member species enrolled. They came to learn how to think like humans, how to question assumptions, how to build ugly things that worked better than beautiful things that didn't. The Academy's motto was displayed above the entrance in 100 languages. If it works, it's not stupid. Vexnar had to admit that there was a certain wisdom in those words. He had spent thousands of years building elegant systems based on proven principles. He had achieved stability and predictability, but he had also achieved stagnation. The humans had achieved something else entirely. They had achieved progress. The Galactic Engineering Council still met regularly, but its purpose had changed. Instead of maintaining standards, it now facilitated innovation. Instead of rejecting proposals, it helped develop them. The laughter that had once greeted human presentations had been replaced by eager anticipation. What crazy idea would the humans propose next, and how would it change everything? 10 years after Marcus Webb's first presentation to the Council, the galaxy faced its greatest challenge. A region of space near the galactic core had become unstable. Massive gravitational disturbances were threatening to tear apart entire star systems. Trillions of lives were at risk. The traditional response would have been evacuation, move populations away from the danger zone, accept the losses that could not be prevented, wait for the phenomenon to stabilize on its own. The human response was different. "We can fix it," Marcus Webb told the emergency session of the Council. He was older now, his hair turning gray, but his eyes still held that same unsettling confidence. "Fix a gravitational anomaly?" Zithara asked. She had become one of the Council's most vocal supporters of human innovation, but even she sounded skeptical. That would require manipulating forces on a stellar scale. Yes, it would. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate present understood what Marcus was suggesting. It was beyond anything any species had ever attempted. It was, by every reasonable measure, impossible. Marcus activated the holographic display. The image showed a device that looked like nothing the assembled aliens had ever seen. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was a massive collection of tubes and chambers and generators, all wrapped together with what appeared to be reinforced mounting bands. "We call it the gravity hammer," Marcus said. "It uses pulse technology scaled up to planetary size. Instead of pushing a ship through space, it pushes space itself." "You want to use explosions to move space?" Vexnar asked. Even after all these years, human ideas could still surprise him. "Controlled gravitational pulses. Each pulse creates a small distortion in the fabric of spacetime. If you sequence them correctly, you can create waves that interact with the existing disturbance. It's like using one ripple to cancel out another." "The energy requirements would be enormous," the Zenthari delegate said. "Beyond enormous. We would need to harvest power from multiple stars simultaneously." "And the risk of failure?" Marcus paused. This was the question he had been dreading. If we fail, the device could amplify the disturbance instead of neutralizing it. The affected region would expand. More systems would be at risk. "And if you succeed?" "We save everyone." The debate lasted for weeks. Engineers from every species analyzed the proposal. Many called it reckless, others called it genius, some called it both. In the end, the council voted to approve the project. Not because they were certain it would work, but because they had learned something from the humans over the past decade. Sometimes the only way to know if something is possible is to try it. The construction of the gravity hammer took 3 years. Every species in the Alliance contributed resources and expertise. Human engineers worked alongside Morven metallurgists, Kelrix programmers, Zenthari physicists, and Thalian safety specialists. The device that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was ugly, improvised, and held together in some places with nothing more than determination and hope. It was perfect. Vexnar stood on the observation deck of the command ship as the final preparations were completed. Marcus Webb stood beside him, looking even older now but still wearing that simple uniform with no decorations or symbols. "Are you afraid?" Vexnar asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted, "but that's never stopped us before." "Your species is remarkable, Engineer Webb. In all my years, I have never encountered anything like you." Marcus laughed softly. "We're not that special, we're just too stubborn to know when to quit." "Perhaps that is what makes you special." The activation sequence began. The gravity hammer powered up, drawing energy from a dozen stars through specially designed collectors. The device hummed with contained power, vibrating slightly as the first pulse was prepared. Then it fired. The pulse traveled outward at speeds that instruments could barely track. It reached the gravitational disturbance and collided with it. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the readings on every monitoring station began to change. The disturbance was weakening. "Second pulse ready," announced the lead engineer, a young human woman who had studied at the academy that Marcus had helped establish. "Fire." Another pulse, another impact, the disturbance weakened further. Over the following hours, the gravity hammer continued its work. Pulse after pulse, each one carefully calibrated based on the effects of those before. The gravitational anomaly that had threatened trillions of lives slowly faded, neutralized by the impossible device built by a galaxy working together. When it was over, when the danger had passed, and the stars in the affected region returned to their normal courses, Vexnar turned to Marcus with a question he had been wanting to ask for years. "What will you humans do next?" Marcus smiled, that same unsettling expression he had worn in his very first presentation to the council. "I have no idea, but I can't wait to find out." The celebration of the gravity hammer's success marked a turning point in galactic history. For the first time, the collected species of the Alliance had worked together to solve a problem that none of them could have solved alone. The lessons learned during that project spread throughout the galaxy, changing how every species thought about engineering, cooperation, and the nature of progress itself. Vexnar retired from the Galactic Engineering Council shortly after, But he did not stop working. He founded an institute dedicated to studying what he called collaborative innovation. Teams of researchers from different species worked together, combining their unique perspectives to tackle problems that had stymied single-species efforts for centuries. The Institute's first major project was a new type of spacecraft that incorporated the best ideas from every member of the Alliance. The Morven contributed their advanced hull materials. The Kelrics provided navigation and computing systems. The Zenthari developed the power management architecture. The Thalians designed the safety protocols. And the humans contributed something that could not be measured or quantified. They contributed an attitude. "The rules are not laws," Marcus Webb told a gathering of young engineers from 12 different species. He was very old now, supported by medical technology that kept his aged body functioning, but his mind was as sharp as ever. "The rules are starting points. They tell you what has worked before, but they do not tell you what might work tomorrow." One of the students, a young Morven with still growing mandibles, raised a manipulator arm. "But if we ignore the rules, how do we know our designs will function?" "You don't," Marcus said. "That's the point. If you know something will work before you try it, then you're not really innovating. You're just copying what came before." "That seems inefficient." Marcus laughed, a dry sound in his aging throat. "It is incredibly inefficient. We waste enormous amounts of time and resources trying things that don't work, but we also find things that do work, things that would never have been discovered by following the established rules." The young Morven considered this. "Among my people, waste is considered a moral failing. We are taught to use every resource with maximum efficiency." And that's a valuable perspective. Efficiency matters. Resources matter. But consider this. What is more wasteful? Spending extra resources on experiments that might fail, or spending thousands of years trapped at the same level of development because you were too afraid to try something new? The question hung in the air of the lecture hall. Every student present had heard stories from their elders about the time before humans joined the Alliance. They had heard about the stagnation, the lack of progress, the slow decline that no one wanted to acknowledge but everyone could feel. They had also heard about what happened after, the explosion of new ideas, the rapid advancement of technology, the sense of possibility that had not existed in living memory. "The humans saved us," said a Thalian student from the back of the room. "Our elders say this. They say that without the humans, our civilizations would have slowly faded into nothing." Marcus shook his head. "We didn't save anyone. We just asked different questions. Every species in this room has the capacity to do what we did. You just need to be willing to look foolish, to fail publicly, to let go of your assumptions about what is and is not possible." "That is easier said than done," Vexnar observed. He had been sitting quietly in the corner, observing the lesson. Cultural habits formed over millennia are not easily changed. "No, they're not, but they can be changed. That's what this institute is for. That's what all of you are for." Marcus looked around the room at the young engineers from a dozen different worlds. "You are the ones who will carry this forward. You will face challenges that we cannot imagine, and when you do, I hope you will remember one thing." "What is that?" asked the Morven student. "The universe doesn't care about your assumptions. It doesn't know that something is supposed to be impossible. It just waits for someone to figure out how to do it anyway." The Institute produced its first major success 5 years later. A team of 6 engineers, representing 6 different species, developed a communication system that allowed instantaneous transmission across any distance. The technology had been declared mathematically impossible by experts from every civilization in the Alliance. It remained impossible until a Kelrics programmer, inspired by human approaches to problem-solving, asked a question that no one had thought to ask before. The answer led to experiments. The experiments led to failures. The failures led to insights. and the insights led to a breakthrough that transformed galactic civilization overnight. News could now travel instantly from one end of the alliance to the other. Families separated by thousands of light years could speak face to face. Trade negotiations that had once taken months could be completed in hours. The fabric of galactic society changed more in a single decade than it had in the previous 5,000 years. And it had all started with a human engineer presenting an ugly drawing of a ship powered by explosions, while aliens laughed at the apparent absurdity of the idea. Marcus Webb did not live to see all the changes his work had inspired. Human lifespans, even extended by medical technology, remained short compared to most galactic species. He passed away quietly at the age of 112, surrounded by friends from a dozen different worlds. Vexnar spoke at his memorial service. After 400 years of life, he had attended many such services, but this one was different. This one mattered in a way that few others had. "When I first met Marcus Webb," Vexnar said, "I thought he was foolish. His ideas seemed dangerous and poorly conceived. His species seemed primitive and reckless. I could not understand why they had been allowed to join our alliance at all." The gathered crowd, representing every member species, listened in silence. "I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. Marcus Webb was one of the wisest beings I have ever known, not because he had all the answers, but because he was not afraid to ask the questions. Not because he knew what was possible, but because he refused to accept what was impossible." Vexnar paused, looking out at the faces of beings who had traveled from across the galaxy to honor a single human life. The humans did not teach us new technology. They taught us something far more valuable. They taught us how to think again. They reminded us that the universe is vast and full of wonders that we have not yet discovered. They showed us that the greatest limitation we face is not lack of resources or knowledge, but lack of imagination. Marcus Webb once told me that humans are just too stubborn to know when to quit. Perhaps that is true, but I prefer to think of it differently. I think humans understand something that the rest of us had forgotten. They understand that the only true failure is the failure to try. The memorial ended with a display that Marcus himself had designed years before his death. A single small ship, ugly and practical, launched from the station and flew into the stars. It was powered by pulse propulsion, the technology that had once seemed so impossible and was now standard throughout the galaxy. As the ship disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying Marcus's ashes toward the heart of the galaxy he had helped transform, Vexnar made a silent promise. He would spend whatever remained of his long life ensuring that the human spirit of innovation never died. He would teach it, nurture it, and spread it to every corner of civilization. Because the universe was vast, and there was still so much to discover. So many impossible things that were waiting for someone stubborn enough to make them possible. The story of human engineers would not end with Marcus Webb. It was only beginning. Somewhere out there, young engineers from every species were looking at problems that seemed unsolvable. They were asking questions that seemed ridiculous. They were drawing ugly diagrams of devices that seemed impossible. And soon, very soon, they would change everything once again.